Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Power-intensive companies in South Africa are now openly expressing their concern about the current price path, which they claim will undermine existing investments and South Africa's beneficiation plans. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the issue. Terence, welcome to Second Take. The energy-intensive user group has done some research on the outlook for power prices and is raising the alarm. What are they saying?
Well, basically they're saying if we get another round of increases like we saw over the last few years, we had the power crisis in 2008, and at that stage everyone agreed the prices were very low. But since then they've moved, the average real price has moved from 25 cents a kilowatt hour through to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So we've basically doubled since 2008. This is not a price that anyone actually pays. You know, we pay a lot more than that as municipal consumers, and everyone else gets different tariffs, but this is an average real price that they've calculated. And that has come about through a series of price increases. In fact, we're in the middle of the second multi-year price determination period, where the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, has granted Eskom increases of 25% times 3. So for the period 2010 through to 2013, we can see there's going to be a lot of power price increases at a high level, and these are compounded every year. And they're warning if we go into the next round of tariff increases with a similar mindset of giving Eskom maybe, because Eskom has indicated they'd like to ask for another 25% type increases. If we have another 2 from 2014, 2015, the energy intensive user group is saying that the power price path trajectory is going to be rising above the 100 cents a kilowatt hour level to around 110 cents a kilowatt hour. And they're saying, you know, that's really a tipping point. It's beyond where furnaces and smelters and large energy intensive businesses can sustain their operations profitably in South Africa. Now this is serious because South Africa's economy by its nature is power and energy intensive. We've got deep level hard rock gold mining and platinum mining. We have large smelters and large furnaces that are in operation. And these are the industries that really create a lot of jobs, unskilled, semi-skilled and skilled jobs. They also buy a lot of products and services from the manufacturing industry, which is under pressure at the moment. And they are often in areas that are outside of the main centres, in rural communities. So these mines and smelters and things like that are left to a point where the margins are no longer attractive. And we've already seen some smelters close in South Africa. You know, it's going to be quite serious for South Africa. And the energy intensive user groups research is saying that the average real tariff shouldn't really rise above 80 cents a kilowatt hour. And if it does, we are in for a very bleak environment for the businesses that are already in this space, but also for minerals beneficiation.
The group says the price path needs to be clarified before South Africa starts implementing climate abatement strategies and policy. Why?
Well, I think these companies are the most vulnerable to the proposed carbon tax that National Treasury is currently, considering. And the Minister Pravin Gordhan indicated that he will be making some sort of announcement on this probably in the next budget in February next year. And the reason for that is that energy is our biggest contributor to our carbon emissions. It's about 83% of our carbon emissions in South Africa. And therefore, most of the action is going to have to be in the energy space. And I think what the energy intensive user group is saying, I think their first target is they're saying that they want the price path to be settled first, so that we know we have some sort of competitive base to continue these businesses from. But they say, we've made commitments without actually doing the research behind those commitments. So at the Copenhagen conference a few years ago, we made a commitment to reduce our emissions by 32% against a business as usual trajectory in terms of carbon emissions. Now that's a very big commitment, and measured against what other commitments other countries have made in terms of their commitment, it is a very ambitious commitment, because other countries have made, for instance, China, relative emission cuts. We're talking about absolute, emission cuts. So we would peak, then plateau, and then reduce our emissions. And they're saying, when Australia, which is currently going through a carbon tax discussion, and it's quite a heated discussion. You know, when they did this work, they actually looked at where the most gains could come from and what those gains would cost. The indications are that we haven't really done that founding research. The other thing is that South Africa's relative emissions are high, so we're in an energy-intensive economy, as I spoke about earlier, and therefore, for every unit of GDP or unit of economic output, we are carbon heavy. But on the other hand, our absolute emissions are fairly low when you look at in world terms, when you look at the USAs and the Chinas, etc. Therefore, if we really do and make a lot of efforts and a lot of progress in this regard, you know, and reduce our absolute emissions, our actual contribution to the climate change thing is going to be fairly small. On the other hand, by making taking those actions, the price of electricity and other costs can rise dramatically and undermine our competitiveness as an economy. And that's going to really result in lower investment in certain areas, lower job creation, particularly in the productive sectors of the economy, which would be mining, agriculture and manufacturing, which is really anti where we are in terms of our policy position at the moment, which says that those should be at the very center of our economy, that we need to change the whole equation of the economy away from the sort of consumer-led equation that we've seen over the last decade and a half to one that's really production-led. And they're saying that, you know, the very ingredients that you need to build productive sectors, you are looking at eroding not just through the power price trajectory, but by adding these uncosted abatement mechanisms on top of that.
Why do you think are they raising their concerns now, after we've already had several tariff increases approved by the regulator?
Well, I think the first point is that they acknowledge, like everyone else, that South Africa's power prices were too low for too long. And that actually led us into that crisis of 2008 when the lights went off. And they do accept that the prices had to rise and still probably do need to rise further. The issue is the rapidity of that rise and whether we can make policy, regulatory and investment choices that, you know, moderate that increase. And the key target, I think, is the next multi-year price determination round. Eskom will have to submit early next year that documentation to NERSA, and then we'll go through that whole process that we've become used to as South Africans of seeing the documentations, being outraged by it, then going through our public hearings and public consultation period, and then eventually NERSA will make a determination. So I think that's their primary target, but they also want to raise these other issues saying, you know, let's get this price path in place, have some sort of certainty that we can sustain our businesses, and then we can look at how we can engage with the climate change challenge.
What is Eskom's current thinking on the matter?
Well, Eskom will have to put its documentation together for NERSA, and I think work has already started on that. They have in public mentioned a couple of times that they need another 25% a year increases, so that would take them to what they believe would be a sustainable price for electricity that will allow them to build the new capacity that's necessary, as well as, well, they believe, you know, keep the lights on and keep industry going. But I think that Eskom itself, when they look at their documentation, they're going to be quite conscious that these prices are surging and surging fast, and that could have an impact on the demand for their product. So they're building this new capacity, and it's a very, very extensive build program. But, you know, we could be at a point where you build this capacity, but the main base of the demand, which is this mining and industrial fraternity, which takes up something like half of our capacity, you know, it takes about half of our demand. If that is eroded, suddenly we might have surplus power capacity, and that would be a worst case scenario. So we built this very expensive power plants, have expensive tariffs, but no one can actually consume it. And actually, the way the methodology works at NERSA, that could force Eskom into asking for even higher tariff increases because they need a basic allowable return, a return on investment. And if there's less demand, they'll need a higher tariff. So we could get into a real vicious circle here of power prices and erosion of economic activity. So I think Eskom will be mindful of that in their next application. And I think that there will be an attempt to balance the need to sustain its credit rating, which is under threat, with the need to sustain demand and have an affordable price. And I think the Energy Intensive Users Group is being very proactive to put this marker down early, so that it's not just Eskom that's aware of that. They're not going to just, stand back and allow Eskom to get another 25 plus 25 for the next 2 years. But that they want government and civil society as a whole to be aware that there are serious implications of just allowing this price path to run rampant.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.